Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to start a new week with such a great event at the very beginning. I may introduce Sascha Pallenberg to you. I don't think that I need to introduce it to too many of you because Sascha is one of the leading German-speaking tech podcasters and bloggers for many, many years now. I must tell you that I'm one of the very early fans of his podcast, Neuland, which I don't know, it's about 2 or 3 years ago when that stopped, unfortunately. But I
Yeah.
was really a very early adopter and I adored this. And Sascha is one of the also early adopters now of everything which is coming with Mastodon. Let me just show you very briefly a little bit more about him. So this is him on Mastodon. You should follow him if you haven't been doing so far. Apart from this, he is also responsible as Chief Awareness Officer for a platform called Aware. We could also perhaps a little bit introduce what this is about. And last not least, he's running many, many websites and blogs and podcasts and whatsoever on the internet, including this one here that I like a lot and that I would like to share with you for one main reason, which is that in the upper left corner, you will find a 101 about how to use Mastodon for German speakers. The goal of today is to do two things here. The first one is to give an English overview about why this new platform, if it is a platform, is interesting and why people should adopt it. And the second topic, in my view, could be how Europe has been doing in all this platform regulation and development changes that are coming and that have been coming. And it might be a good reason to talk about this with Sascha because he has been living in Taiwan, in Taipei, for quite some years now. So he does why this is interesting and how it is seen differently in other areas of the world. Sascha, welcome. Very, very happy to have you here. Let us start. Why is Mastodon such an interesting topic for you?
Well, Niklas, first of all, thank you so much. What a nice introduction, and also, kind of put me a little bit on memory lane in terms of what kind of podcasts I used to do in the past. And you mentioned Neuland, that I did together with Carsten Knobloch of Stadt Bremerhaven, another very, very famous tech blog in Germany. But I think it's about 5 years now, or even almost 6 years since we stopped Neuland. I have to correct you on one thing. I wouldn't say that I'm an early adopter of Mastodon because Mastodon was developed back in 2016. I just started really using Mastodon back in April after Elon Musk announced that he's going to buy Twitter. I got in touch with the idea of the Fediverse like every while and then, and looked into this kind of activity pub protocol, which is an open protocol that can connect various services. But I never really got into it because I was just so heavily driven by the content that I put out on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, on all of these platforms that are heavily driven by algorithms. But I mean, now it just turned out for me that I somewhat was wrong about the way I use the internet, let's say the way I use social media in the past. And using Mastodon right now for me is just such an eye opener when it comes to how we define interaction and communication on the web, how we gonna reclaim the web for us. Because I mean, when you turn back time about 25 years or so, when you looked at what were the biggest platform to have talks on the web, whether it was the internet relay chat or you had huge forums where thousands and thousands of people gathered and you were just discussing various topics. And then with the so-called Web 2.0, we had these massive gatekeepers joining the internet, whether it was Facebook, whether it was Google, and whatever came out of it, right? Or now we also have like TikTok and stuff like this. And all of them, private companies, heavily based on the idea of how to monetize users, how to monetize the content, and running platforms that were driven by algorithms and kind of pushed us further and further down the rabbit hole of these echo chambers. As soon as you liked the content of specific persons with specific political views, with specific topics, the Facebooks of this world would push more and more content that was in context of this already liked content from you into your feed. And that obviously kind of created all these problems that we have in nowadays. And now with Mastodon, you have to understand it like this is a collection of thousands and thousands of servers that are running on the same protocol that can connect to each other. So you can sign up for one single server, or it's called an instance, and they can create your account on these. There are kind of general topic servers, but there are also servers that are heavily specified in terms of the topic. Let's say, for example, there is Mastodon, which is an instant for astronomers. There are science instances. There are instances for people that are journalists or working in the media industry or that are more towards a sustainable future and whatnot. So it's or teachers, educational business. It's super interesting to see this. As soon as for example, when I discovered like a science server for the very, very first time, it almost felt to me like I want to follow each and every person on the server because they have so many interesting things to say. And due to this kind of decentralized nature of it, and also due to a couple of features. For example, you have now, you can use 500 characters instead of 280 compared to Twitter, which gives you more room to kind of get your thoughts out there, to kind of put your perspective into the Fediverse. And in general, I have a feeling it is just a very, very kind community. This might change, right, a lot, right? The more people are arriving, and the more, well, sooner or later, the more people are arriving, you will also give access to trolls and bots and whatnot. But this decentralized nature of Mastodon definitely has an impact. A couple of design features also have an impact on the tonality and the way that people interact with each other. I would call it almost like an antiviral design. So when you look at Twitter, you always have this kind of very, very prominent feature of this column of the recent Twitter trends. And most of them are quite extreme, about extreme positions and kind of, where people are just getting triggered by. You don't really have this on Mastodon. You also can't quote a post on Mastodon, which I really like. You won't see how many likes and how many repostings a post got in your main feed. You're going to see this as soon as you click on a post. Couple of tweaks that definitely made a difference for me, and where I would say, you know what, it is just so important for our societies that we don't let private companies that are heavily driven by financial interests and their algorithms let us dictate how we have to communicate with each other, but rather go for open protocols, no algorithm at all, and a more diverse structure. And this is exactly what Mastodon is all about for me.
Yeah, Sasha, that's great. And I think both of us are old enough to remember this very old days when the internet very much looked like this, right? So when in the 90s, the whole internet looked like this. However, since then, there has been this development to less and less of view and viewer platforms. And there must be a reason for this. One of the reasons might be that people have only a limited amount of time. And if you have only a limited amount of time, you want to get content that is ready for you, right? And the machine is doing exactly this for you. So why should this be different now, 30 years later? Don't you think that all of us will be completely overwhelmed by people talking? And again, somebody will need to help us to identify those things in this whole stream that are relevant to us.
That's a rather good point that you just made, Nicolas. We are only have each and every person that I know on this planet only has like 24 hours a day, right? And this might not going to change in the near future. So therefore, we have to figure out, what we're going to do with our time. But here's the thing: all these other algorithm-driven platforms are designed in the way to keep us on these platforms. So what actually they're doing the complete opposite with their algorithms. Like, and I mean, there's this kind of famous term of doom scrolling, or just scrolling through the feeds, right? And you just almost can't stop. And I think this kind of antiviral design of Mastodon does the complete opposite. I mean, at the end of the day, it depends of who you're following, how you're going to set up your feed, right? If you're going to look into your very, very personal feed. And for me, if I compare this, for example, to Twitter, I think I ended up with almost 130,000 tweets before I just stopped tweeting, which is an insane amount of tweets. And when I look back at this, I was like, holy shit, I never ever expected anything like it. But constantly, the Twitter algorithm, but also the likes and the retweets and whatnot and the comments, kind of forced me to pump out more content. I almost had kind of this pressure of creating content on a daily basis. Well, I do this somewhat for Mastodon, but not like that. I think, okay, I need to get like 10 postings out a day or whatnot. I have my good morning posting and something that is really, really interesting to me. And, whenever I have time, I'm going to have a look at a Mastodon again, try to interact with some people, and try to figure out how it's developing. But that's about it. And I think this is also caused by the design of the platform itself. It makes a huge difference that the viral stuff is not getting pumped into your tweet and kind of forces you to interact with it. It makes a huge difference that you're not constantly getting triggered by hypes and trends that are forcing you to also, I think you should also participate in this new topic and in this global town hall like Elon Musk wants us to believe in. This is kind of, it is engagement by design, what these platforms are doing. And you don't have this at Mastodon. And I truly believe that this is also good for our mental health. Well, I can definitely tell that the impact that Mastodon had on me, especially in the last, let's say, 4 or 5 weeks, made a difference. I feel way more balanced. I sometimes don't even have any idea what the next biggest shitstorm is on Twitter right now, right? Who is getting called out over there? And you know what? My life goes on. I feel like I haven't missed out on anything. And as soon as you get this idea that you don't miss anything, that you don't need to be the one that in 5 minutes has to react on a specific statement, on a specific topic, or that you don't know that this earthquake just happened like 10 seconds ago, or that this politician made this statement about 5 minutes ago. Geez, mankind survived for thousands and thousands of years without knowing what was going on, without this kind of just-in-time communication and back and forth. And I think Mastodon really, really was a fundamental eye-opener for me again. And actually, I'm really embarrassed the way that I treated a couple of services on the Fediverse before, whether it was kind of a Friendica or a Diaspora, which is, I think, a different protocol. I'm not so sure right now, where I just basically said in all my arrogancy of not knowing what these services are all about, they basically said, you know what, they will never, ever make it. But now we have a dynamic where I truly believe that we have a chance here. We have a chance to get back, to get the web back. And on Mastodon, I think we have roughly, in average right now, about 50,000 new accounts every day. That's about 1.5 million new users each and every month. And I like the idea that you brought up a couple of minutes ago by saying, you know what, it's basically like the web of the 90s. Yeah.
Mhm.
And here is where it really gets interesting, because there are people out there that are trying to convince us that the future of the web is a decentralized version, but they're
Mhm.
trying to push this narrative through blockchain, through crypto, through metaverse, through I don't know, whatever.
Mhm.
Mastodon works and the Fediverse works without any of these kind of bullshit bingo hashtags and terms. It
Yeah.
just brings us back to the origin of the web. And I
Mhm.
think it's beautiful.
Yeah, you also posted this, right? The algorithm is people, and I think this is beautiful indeed. So, I mean, there are very many interesting points here. One of them that you make is also made by one of our viewers who says that I got slowly used to the Fediverse mostly because of the lack of friends and companies slash new accounts. So this network effect that is important probably is now there because there are enough people, there's a sufficient amount of interesting people that it makes worth spending time there, because you will find content that is interesting. And the other point that you are making is also very relevant, which is that this idea of the Fediverse is neither is it new nor is it the only one that we are seeing at the moment, because blockchain and all the others are pushing the very same idea, and it's a kind of irony that that all this comes together. All this comes together in such a moment. However, I have one very practical question, which is: you stopped Twitter. Did you import your tweet somewhere, or did you just leave it and leave the content there and don't care any longer about it?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. I can't close down my account. I'm just a little bit scared about kind of impersonation on the platform
Mhm.
itself. So it's going into kind of read-only status. Well, as soon as I'm getting a new podcast out, which I'm still using the podcast account for, but I'm
Mhm.
also retweeting it through my personal account to just use the reach of it. But that's about it. You know,
Mhm.
I'm not liking anything anymore. I'm not following people. I'm not interacting with people, and I'm not gonna publish original content on
Mhm.
Twitter through my personal account. I just can't do this. I just can't do this because everything that I believe in about how we should use the web, I mean, I'm kind of romanticizing it, of course, the web, because when I connected to my very first mailbox in the 80s, it was just so mind blowing for me that I could connect to another computer that was on the west coast of the US, and I could actually leave a comment on a blackboard,
Same
right?
here. Same here. Life-changing
And
event, right? So,
that,
yeah,
that was absolutely mind-blowing, because
yeah.
you know what, especially in this young age, and out of a sudden it
Mhm.
feels like someone just kind of opened a window to
Mhm.
this cloud of information and
Mhm.
the possibilities what this would mean to us. And then in the 90s, and as soon as we had these forums, as soon as we had chat rooms, as soon as the Wikipedia was established, and out of a sudden the mobile internet kicked in, and anywhere you've been in the world, you had the possibilities to access the wisdom of mankind. How cool
Mhm.
is this? It's the most amazing invention that we ever created. Um, to see that this isn't in the hands of someone who is just inviting all these populists and trolls and bots back to a platform, who is obviously not what he thinks he is in terms of free speech and in terms
Mhm.
of being a balanced person, and someone who is doing this for all mankind.
Mhm.
I just can't support it anymore. There is just no chance. As sad as this is, and I had a massive reach on Twitter. It is very important, not only in terms of the reach, but also in terms of what kind of accounts are following me when it comes to companies or politicians or whatnot, which was a very important impact for me. Um, but you know what? You need
Mhm.
to make a decision, and this is not the platform that I signed up for. I don't want to get manipulated by it. I don't want to support it. It's about time to do something not new,
Mhm.
but to do the right thing. And the
Mhm.
right thing for me is use an open platform, be transparent, and try to do anything that I can do to convince people that this is the future, that we need to change something, because we've seen, especially in the last 5 or 6 years, where the world came to, because we just opened these platforms and we opened these algorithm driven distribution channels for also for hate speech and for populists, what this did to our societies.
Mhm.
And it's so scary to see that. I give you an example. Well, I just live around the corner of mainland China here in Taiwan, and for the very very first time since the late 80s, we have public protests in China right now. And what happened on Twitter was that a couple of hashtags with the name of Chinese cities were trending, for example, Shanghai or Guangzhou or whatnot. And out of a sudden, you saw thousands and thousands of Chinese bots participating in this discussion using the hashtag and then just linking to some escort sites or whatnot to kind of make sure that they are overpowering the amount of content that is posted from these protests in China, which also brings someone like Elon Musk in a quite delicate position in terms of, first of all, financially, he's heavily dependent with Tesla on China, because this is where their production plant is in Shanghai, where they almost generate 100% of their profits. But he also would like to appeal to the Western world as someone who is taking care of free speech. And this is something that's kind of, situation where I don't want to be in. It was about time. For me, it feels like entering the Fediverse through Mastodon. It's very, very important to not only talk about Mastodon, that it's part of the Fediverse, but having the chance to now experience this, it kind of triggers me in the most positive way of like discovering the internet again.
Yeah.
And also kind of connecting to people that I haven't talked to for over 10, 15, 20 years. Big idols and that I had in terms of when I started with tech blogging or what, or people that I looked up to. And now I can kind of connect with them. And, they're telling me exactly the same. They say, damn, it feels like the 90s all over again. And it feels like that the internet gives us all these opportunities, and now people are coming together to work on this.
Yeah. Sasha, what you're talking about China is extremely interesting to me, because as you certainly know, when you talk about regulation of the internet from a European perspective, the typical answer that you're getting is that we need to find, from the Commission at least, is that we need to find our European way, which is not the Chinese state surveillance idea of platforms, nor the US market liberalism and everything goes idea of platform, but that we are going somewhere in the middle through those two extremes. Could you perhaps comment on the first one, which is the Chinese part of this? I mean, from what you hear about what's going on in China here in Europe, I mean, this is the perfect, I would even call it the master copy of how a platform can be put into extremis with WeChat and all the other instruments that are used. Do you think that people in China understand the potential coming with Mastodon and Fediverse and other diverse and more platform-based ideas as they looked like in the 90s, meaning that there are many, many platforms and not just one or two? Do you think that there is this potentially seen by the people in China, and is there any reaction from the political system on this?
I mean, there's a massive potential. I can just give you an idea about the user scenario and registered accounts on Mastodon from China, but I would like to compare it to a phenomena that occurred during the first COVID lockdowns, and when out of a sudden this idea of Clubhouse came up. Yeah, this was this kind of a voice chat community that everyone was just kind of making a big fuss about. At that time, for the first 2 or 3 days, there was a massive amount of Chinese rooms where people, for the very, very first time, found out about the happenings of the Tiananmen massacre,
mm,
in Beijing in 1989. They had no idea that this actually happened, and it only took like 4 days until the Chinese government shut this down and kind of blocked the access for
mm,
Chinese users to Clubhouse. But we should never underestimate, of course, the capabilities of them. I mean, you can still use a VPN in China. A lot of people are actually doing this. And of course, Mastodon is an amazing opportunity to kind of get the word out and to kind of help to let the outer world know what is, in my opinion, so important. Because when we talk about China, we mainly talk about the regime of mainland China instead
mm,
of the people.
mm,
And what we see is happening right now in the last couple of days or so is that these people seem to understand that you know what, that they have to do something. I'm not saying that this is a kind of uprising or whatnot, but
mhm,
we can see scenes online that I've never seen before in
mhm,
China since the late 80s. And I
mhm,
think this is something that is really, really interesting to watch.
mhm, mhm,
Besides that, you mentioned WeChat. Um, I've never ever seen anything like everyone, and then I look back on WeChat and I try to search for some hashtags or some topics over there. Um, there's this kind of censorship machinery of mainland China. It's just blocking and deleting millions and millions and millions of comments
mhm,
each and every day. It's going wild right now. By the way, this is also something that really scares me about Twitter, because Elon Musk is saying, okay, I want to create a kind of Western version
mhm,
of WeChat, the so-called anything app. It really scares me. WeChat is probably the biggest big brother tool or app that mankind has ever seen, and therefore it might be a chance for mainland Chinese to use Mastodon. It might be a chance for them to speak up through such an infrastructure. This is something that, I mean, we really have to take a closer look in the upcoming days, because I think right now we are at a point where we are gonna experience if this is just was this kind of protest about specific events, they were more of a temporary protest, or if this is going to be an ongoing event. No matter what, as I said, I would like to repeat myself. I've never ever seen anything like this coming out of mainland China for way over 30 years. And I think this is something that we really have to notice.
Yeah, and the frustrating part of this, if I may add, is that again, I think mainstream politics in Europe doesn't even get it, right? Because they don't
Yeah,
see it, right? It's
yeah,
it's I mean, which brings me to a question in a way, which is, I mean, from a European perspective, where we stand at the moment in Europe is that we are driven, as you rightly put it, by global companies, not necessarily European ones, being in a gatekeeper function that we never saw before, already now. I mean, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, you name it, right? They are YouPorn if you want, right? So everything that you're doing is in a way governed by a few platforms on the internet. And there is a huge idea now coming up again, which is a 30 years old idea, and one would expect Europe fully jumping on this and changing everything that they can in order to get part of that trend, or get some grip on that trend at least. I don't see anything on that. Do you? I mean, or is it just me missing the thing?
well, there's actually an official instance or server on Mastodon from the European
I
Union.
saw that. Yeah, I mean, I saw
Yeah,
that, and
so
it's a tiny part. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
it's slowly getting there,
Hmm.
right? And I truly believe that as soon as Europe defined the DSA, the so-called Digital Service Act,
Hmm.
and the way they defined the rules for online content, online communication platforms, distribution channels with
Hmm.
this was a clear statement to these gatekeepers. It was a clear statement towards Meta with Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp. It was a true statement or clear statement towards Google, but it was a very, very clear statement, in my opinion, towards Twitter. And when we look at just the recent developments in just the last 3 days, we had in Dublin an injunction granted by a high court of Ireland towards Twitter, that the way that Twitter fired their employees in Ireland was illegal. So this will have a huge impact towards the way that Twitter treated its employees throughout Europe. But it's getting even more spicy, in my opinion, because they closed down the office in Brussels. That means the contact and the lobbyists of Twitter that have to figure out how they can make sure that they're in the rules of the Digital Service Act of the European Union. These guys are not there anymore. The European Union made already, as soon as Musk bought Twitter, a very clear statement by saying, and in Europe, the bird flies under our rules, because Musk just said, you know what, we freed the bird. And this is going to happen because the punishments are going to be so harsh. I believe that this could ultimately actually mean the downfall for a platform like Twitter, because right now they don't have the staff to handle all the hate speech on the platform itself. The European regulators are just observing it each and every day, and they take their notes. And sooner or later, it's just going to happen. This is not a question of if it's going to happen that they're going to sue Twitter. This is a matter of when they're going to sue Twitter, and this would mean a massive blow to this company, which is heavily understaffed, which obviously lost most of its brightest minds and the people with the longest experience running this platform. And when you know how teams in on such platforms are set up, and the way they are running it and the way they're running their shifts, it is, from my understanding, pretty clear that sooner or later they run into massive problems. Actually, I think it was already last night, Musk also said, we had a little bit of a problem in terms of performance. Something was going on. And you know what? I'm not sure if they fixed it. At least he told his followers so. But these are the first little glitches that are coming up. There was another glitch when he thought about switching off kind of microservices that were connecting to the app, and therefore kind of creating a little bit of latency and delays in the performance of it, depending on where you were based in the world. And out of a sudden, the two-factor authorization wasn't working anymore. This could pile up. And once again, I truly believe that the regulators are looking into it. I also truly believe that, once again, Musk is probably the biggest ambassador for countries, for regulators, to have a different perspective on the way we use the web. From my idea, or from my point of view, it just makes no sense that organizations, that authorities, that politicians that are funded by taxpayers' money are actually using this money to feed the algorithm of a private platform that is heavily, or for 95%, dependent on advertisement money. They need to make sure that they're running this content on public protocols, and therefore, for the very, very first time, I truly believe that we have a contender and competitor here with the Fediverse.
Yeah, so this is extremely interesting to me, and I was not precise enough in my question, and I could be more precise, hopefully now. So the question is the following. I mean, I remember times when the German data protection authority was more or less the only one being present on the Fediverse and constantly asking people to join, and he was quite alone there for quite some time. And now we do have a movement. And I would expect public authorities all over in Europe to proactively support this. And if not proactively supporting it, then at least getting rid of all the red tape that is there for the admins of those instances. Because from a legal perspective, I must tell you, unfortunately, it's not risk-free, right? There's plenty of issues coming with running an instance if you are unlucky. And I don't see too much of a development here. And that is what I'm asking, whether there shouldn't be much more proactive statements given at the moment from regulators, authorities, governments, parliaments, you name it, that this is an opportunity. Second question, coming with the first one. If Twitter really disappeared today, because of all the wrong decisions taken by the leading management, don't you think that would be a serious issue for Europe at the moment, at least, as it would have been a serious issue if Facebook had decided 10 years ago to simply close its doors in Europe, what they supposedly threatened to do sometimes in their development. At least you got rumors about that they said, okay, then if Europe is so stupid, then let's simply leave Europe. And wouldn't that cause more harm to the legal system and the political system than we are facing at the moment? And then third question, coming with the second one, aren't you too optimistic when you look into GDPR and its development in Europe? Because that was very much the main argument, right? The main argument was we take the big players seriously and we treat them seriously and they will follow European rules. And that's now more than 10 years old, this claim. And I don't see too much of a change in many of them. Do you?
Well, first of all, regarding your first question, you're absolutely right. Yeah, running a Mastodon instance or server is more or less a little bit of the Wild West of the internet in terms of how I'm going to comply to regulations and rules and laws or whatnot. So this still lies in the hand of mostly kind of hobby admins right now, which maybe is also a little bit about the charm of the idea of the Fediverse, in my opinion. But yes, they are professional instances. They're professional servers. They're servers run by people that are sysadmins for 20 or 30 years or whatnot. These guys know what they do, right? There are also, I wouldn't say professional admins in terms of the way they monetize it, but where you actually have to pay a fee because they want to make sure that they, in terms of content moderation, that they at least have some part-time employees or can pay the server admin so that he can run this. This is happening on the go right now. Yes, this has been around for many, many years, but the impact that the Fediverse and especially Mastodon got from these Twitter refugees, or I mean, I think refugee is the wrong term because then we try to compare it to something way, way, way more serious. But people that were kind of leaving Twitter or other platforms, they've never seen any dynamics like this. So it is developing on the go. And secondly, I'm 100% with you. I truly believe that regulators should welcome them with open arms and educate them about what's going on, because this is not about kind of creating small little microcosms of instances with their own little rule and kind of almost an idea of a pirate radio station, yeah, that is kind of shipping in international waters somewhere and you can't get them legally. But to kind of embrace this idea, help them to understand it, help them to understand what the rules are, and therefore actually supporting them to kind of keep on doing what they are doing, because what they are doing is important for the web. And I think we are at a point where more and more European servers and admins are getting it, are getting the idea of that they really, really have to do something regarding this, and that they really have to work on this. But you know what? In my humble opinion, it's basically like the same if you're running a website. Yeah, you have to be 100% sure of what kind of content you're going to publish on it, right? And that you can play by the rules. And at the end of the day, you are the one that is in charge of it. So considering that these guys that are running instances right now are adults and they obviously got to know how to get through their adulthood and their life and how to kind of play by the rules in whatever everyday situations, I
Mm.
just hope that they will also get it. I mean, it's the year 2022. We all know that the internet is not any kind of distant place where no laws and rules apply.
Mm.
So therefore, I would just hope that we will get any kind of campaign from the European Union.
Mm.
Yeah, a little bit of a PR and marketing campaign that helps people to understand what's going on. And then you also need to kind of forward it into each and every region. Uh, Plus, on top of it, we also have to understand that, especially in the beginnings of Mastodon, it was very heavily focused on German servers. It
Mm.
was developed by a young guy from Germany, and but this becomes more and more international right now,
Mm. Mm.
and therefore it will definitely fall into different laws. First of all, the regional laws where the servers
Mm.
are hosted. But as soon as you use these servers to distribute into another region on this planet that obviously has different laws and regulations, you need to be 100% aware of this. I truly
Yeah.
believe that this is going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure whether I'm that optimistic that this is a good development, because I think that this is one of the main reasons why the internet developed in the way it developed, because the legal uncertainties are serious enough to trigger professionality, and this triggers if less players on the market, right? So my instance is run by a student. I don't think that he has the capacity that she has the capacity to I mean to sue someone or to get sued by someone
Yeah.
on and then to start to think about whether GDPR applies or this or that law applies. So that is something which is, in my view, something we really need to be very cautious about how this is going to develop. But and again, as I said, this the bird will fly by European rules is, in my view, completely over optimistic and not really putting things to the point, because this did not happen so far. We have a 15 years or 20 years history now in Europe where those players did not follow, or at least many people argue that they did not follow any of the European rules at all, at least not the basic ideas behind them, and still they are market dominant, right? So I don't see why it should change now, which brings me back to this GDPR question that I asked before. Don't you think that Europe is, I mean, the official political Europe is constantly overestimating their own position and the importance of regulation in changing something in these positions?
I truly don't think so.
Okay.
I believe that the European Union has been the biggest ambassador, right? By
Mm.
far not enough, by the way. No, don't get me
Mm.
wrong, but compared to other markets and societies, by far the biggest ambassador in terms of um, how they're gonna protect data and privacy from users online, how they gonna force competitive laws, especially when it comes to, I mean, we all remember this kind of famous idea when Microsoft shipped Windows with a pre-installed Internet Explorer.
Mm.
The hefty fine that the European Union put on Microsoft and basically kind of destroyed this. The hefty fines that the European Union put on various players like Google and Facebook and whatnot. We can discuss if this is enough,
Mm.
because as hefty we would think these amounts of money are for these global players, these are basically peanuts.
Mm.
But I truly believe that right now we are in a position with DSA that, due to the developments in the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years, with the combination or in context of the rise of populism, especially also regarding to what happened in the US with the election of Donald Trump, what happened with the storm of the Capitol, with all the election lies, also what happened during the Corona period in Europe, that the way they look at these developments is a little bit more through a kind of more concerned perspective.
Mhm.
And I believe that regarding the latest developments on Twitter, and by the way, not only the European Union, but also the US right now. And this is mainly driven by the fact that the second biggest shareholder is Saudi Arabia of Twitter right now. So it's just like, it gets scarier and scarier. I don't know how to sum this up anymore. Sometimes I feel like I live in a kind of alternative reality. But these guys definitely got an idea of what's going to happen if you're not going to regulate a platform the way you should do. And sometimes it's kind of, the processes and mechanisms of these authorities and the way they are building up a case towards something takes years and years and years. Because especially if they would kind of work on it, get it all together, and then they would lose this in front of any kind of European law, that would be a huge problem. I believe that they have not only one case right now, they have many, many, many cases, and sooner or later it's going to hit Twitter. It's really going to happen. It's going to be the same as in the US, where I truly believe that the future of Meta and the combination of Facebook and WhatsApp and Instagram is definitely unwritten. And I wouldn't put my money on the idea of having these three massive services combined under the roof of one company in 5 years from now. I truly don't think so. I truly believe that the US American regulators will do something about it. And therefore, I also do believe that the European Union will do something about Twitter in these days. It started already this week. Yeah, I mean, we have these first outcomes from a European court in Ireland regarding the way that Twitter treats employees, and we also have the first ideas of what is going to happen, what Brussels might do and think about the idea of Twitter abandoning its Brussels office, and especially in the way that Elon Musk is treating this platform by saying, you know what, I'm running just a poll to give an amnesty to each and every banned Twitter account, and he's opening the gates of hell with it, because all of these kind of wide-wing trolls and harassers and whatnot are coming back to this platform. This will have a huge impact on what the European Union is about to decide. And as I said, we're going to see something, well, maybe not this year anymore regarding this development, but I think 2023 will just show us that we're still living in the European Union, the idea of the European Union. I wouldn't say, I mean, it's perfect or it's great the way they dealt with it in the past, but it still is, compared to other ideas and visions, something where we can truly see, okay, we have some development going on over there, and they're obviously up for a fight with these platforms, and that they will hopefully stand up for the rules of the laws that they defined by themselves.
Yeah, it's very interesting that I think, because you are taking the position one would expect that I should take in this talk, and this is very interesting. Let me put it a little bit differently. I mean, one of the major platforms from a European, not only from a European, but also from a European perspective, that became very, very important in the last years was TikTok, in particular when it comes to the younger people. And as you know much better than I do, I mean, TikTok has in its terms and conditions at the moment a very tiny hint that it might be that in compliance with GDPR, lots of legal speak, blah, 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 the information might be transferred to mainland China, right? There might be people remotely accessing TikTok data from 13-year-old teens here in Europe on a massive basis, right? And I would consider this to be a strategic problem for a continent like Europe. And I mean, there's plenty of regulation and PR and whatsoever coming, but it didn't change anything of the behavior of the young people so far as I can tell. Nobody cares because they want to get the product, right? Which is attractive to them, obviously. And then suddenly, after years of this development, something like a technological innovation like Mastodon appears, and people start to switch platforms, although they could have taken all those regulatory warning signs for many months before that, stopping using the first one. They decide to stop using the first one after having received an alternative, right? And this is what I'm interested in, whether rules and regulations and PR and morals and whatsoever are sufficient if you don't provide people with an alternative which is technically as interesting, at least. And I think this is happening now with Mastodon. This is why it's interesting to me, because suddenly people start to get it, that this is also in their user experience an interesting alternative. Question, I mean, perhaps I'm too optimistic about the technology and you are too optimistic about the law, right? Could be. Question then is, do you think that this is something which will change behavior, in particular of the younger generation, significantly enough that they stop using centralized platforms?
I mean, you came up with a prime example for the case I just made, right? And that's TikTok.
Yeah.
We should, as much as I love some of the content that is happening on TikTok, and I think in terms of creativity, this is one of the most vibrant platforms that we know of, and the way it developed in the last years. But at the end of the day, we're talking about a Chinese company, and if you're talking about a Chinese company, that also means that in the boards of director will be someone from Chinese from the Communist Party of China. And that means control of content. That means control of data. And as we all know, the United States just last week banned the Chinese companies Huawei and ZTE from its markets. And this is not because of kind of the B2C products of a smartphone or whatnot. This is heavily aimed at infrastructures and mobile technology. This will be a massive blow to these companies. We also have to remember that before Google pulled out of its services of Android from the Huawei smartphones, Huawei was the biggest smartphone manufacturer in the world. It was actually number one for a brief amount of time. And so the impact that these Western markets can still have on these companies are massive, and sometimes actually massively underrated. TikTok is a prime example. TikTok has an algorithm that forces engagement like no other, especially as soon as you upload your very, very first TikTok video. Out of a sudden, you're going to see a form of engagement and views, even though that no one is following you, that kind of connects you to this platform and makes you addictive. And also the way they kind of designed it, right? The swiping of 30 seconds, little video snippets where you just, but maybe at the end of the day, you just want to have a look at TikTok for 5 minutes, and all of a sudden you're swiping for 15 minutes. Now, this is this engagement idea by design. And I think the regulators neglected this a little bit. Regarding TikTok, I truly believe that the US regulators in their position towards Chinese companies are way more progressive than the European Union. And I truly believe that anything that we are doing in collaboration with Chinese companies is a security risk. because I mean the data will get collected over there. They're going to analyzing it, and they will know exactly the way we interact with each other. It's that simple. The knowledge graphs they create out of this for the specific regions are a massive tool of understanding where our societies and where our systems are the most vulnerable. Therefore, I believe the biggest step forward is basically something that I'm preaching for the last 20 years or so. Each and every elementary school kid needs to get educated, as I said, already in elementary school, needs to get educated about what's happening online, needs to get educated about these apps, and also needs to get educated about alternatives and what will be possible. And we also need to create the infrastructure. Why don't we have, like, let's say, Pixel Feed, which is the Fediverse version of Instagram? Why don't we have something like this that is run by the European Union with professional moderators? Why don't we have instances specifically for kids so that they can use this, right? And where we kind of come up with a system that we can verify these accounts, that we can protect these spaces, that we're creating safe spaces so that the kids can explore the web. And we don't do anything about this right now, and that's a huge problem. It kind of sounds so pragmatic and rational that I try to trade in this amazing idea of the freedom of the internet for regulation. But we know what the freedom of the internet did to our societies. We need this regulation, and we need more safe spaces so that we can actually also provide alternatives. But it all starts with education.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you, right? So education is something where we can fully invest and need to invest much more than we did. And probably also usability would be the second term that I would use. Because one of the answers that I would give you why Pixel Feed run by the European Union would not work would be that, provided that it looks like many of the other European driven technological innovations, people would simply not be able to use it. So usability would be the second term. Sasha, it was so great, and it is still so great to talk to you, but I don't want to consume too much of your time because it's already late afternoon where you are at the moment, and I don't know, the first drink or beer or whatever, or the next appointment is waiting. So let's, if I may, close this by sharing once again this extraordinary website here. You should follow him, and you should also consume all the content which is about Mastodon and how to use it if you are new to this. And please trust us, it's worth every minute that you invest into this, because it's a very, very interesting development. Sasha, is there anything that you would like to share with our audience at the end that we didn't cover yet? Please go ahead.
No, I would love to, because we still have 2 more questions in the chat, and I would love.
I'm sorry.
I would love to refer to. I think his name is Hande. I hope I pronounce it in the proper way. What do you think about the possible filter bubbles that such a Fediverse architecture can cause? You're absolutely right, especially when we talk about kind of closed instances and services that are very, very topic related. But I would look at it as if we would compare this to the idea of Reddit, this massive forum, and you have these subreddits, right? You have a German, or you have a Turkish, or you have an English subreddit, kind of, I mean, you're creating bubbles. Yes, you do, but therefore, it is just so important that the interconnectivity in between the different services instances will be something that is constantly getting promoted. And the more people are using Mastodon, the more people are connecting with people from other instances. That also means they gonna distribute this content into the main feed of their very, very own local instance. And therefore, we have this kind of variety. But you are right, this could be a little bit of a problem. And I mean, when you look at what Trump is doing with Truth Social, this is running on ActivityPub. They're basically using an idea of Mastodon. And so they created this bubble for these right-wingers. And your second question was, how can we ensure on networks like Mastodon that we can get people from different instances indeed to talk to one another? You just need to kind of support people in the idea of connecting with others. And I saw sometimes accounts calling, I think, Fediverse follower tips or whatnot. They're posting each and every day a little posting where they kind of introduce interesting accounts. So, and I think this is what this is all about. And on top of it, I truly believe that moderators and admins of the various instances need to be a little bit more proactively pushing this idea that there is a world outside of their instance. You know what? I truly believe that if we have this kind of topic-related servers, this can be a fantastic way of, especially when you're interested in this topic, kind of to feel at home and to kind of talk to like-minded people, which gives you an easier way of, kind of moving into the Fediverse and moving into Mastodon. It would be the same, right? You would, if you want to go for a concert, it would be probably from a band or from a composer that you like, right? Where you would also meet like-minded people. And so when we look at this, admins and moderators of these instances constantly need to at least set up a little bit of a process, having some bots on the instance that are constantly pushing interesting content and interesting accounts from various instances all around the Fediverse. So I think the possibility is there. And I have to say, especially when I'm on the original Mastodon.social instance, and therefore, I mean, there's just so much content going on. I would never, ever run out of ideas of who to follow or not.
Me neither. I'm on a local instance, and I'm in the same problem at the moment. Thank you so much, Sasha. Thank you to all our listeners.
Thank
it was
you,
a great
Nikolaus.
start, really, of the week. Thank you so much for your time. I hope that we stay connected. I hope that you stay interested, and I do hope that all of us stay as healthy as possible or become as healthy as possible as quickly as possible. All the best. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take